What's up, guys? This is Justin from the I Believe in Humans podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. This show is made possible with the generous donations from patrons like yourself supporting us over at Patreon. So head on over to Patreon, check out the different membership levels we have, subscribe, and take advantage of all the extra cool bonus content that we'll be throwing your way that is exclusive to Patreon members only. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate the support. We'll see you next time.
It's one small step for man.
Welcome there.
One giant leap for mankind.
What's up, man? It's Rick.
UFOs are real.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the I Believe in Humans podcast. I'm your host, Justin, and that is my co-host, Mr. Dustin. How we doing, brother?
Hey, I'm doing all right, JT. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm coming to you from up in New York. If you couldn't tell, I got my Yankees hat out. I'm on the road again, so down here with the lights on, I don't have the usual atmosphere that feels like a bad strip club or something where it's like they got like a $20 lunch buffet.
Well, it still looks like it smells like one, so I'm still feeling it. I'm still feeling it.
It does. So how are you been, man?
I'm all right, dude. I'm all right. I mean,
surviving?
I'm surviving, staying healthy. I'm nervous though, man. Like I thought COVID was going away and life is going to start picking back up, and then our president fucking got it, and now our football players are starting to get it. Like, dude, if it comes after my quarterback, I'm worried that they're going to shut the world down, because just last time it shut down, they paused basketball, baseball got postponed, and then we're stuck indoors, dude. So if they shut down football, I think that's going to be the telltale sign that it's going to happen.
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about them shutting down football. I know they postponed a few games and stuff, but I always think of that movie, I think it was called Concussion with Will Smith, and they're like, there's some line in the trailer where it's like, you're going against the NFL? Like, they own a day of the week. And it's like, I just picture like Roger Goodell and like all the owners together and like, we own Sunday. We're not going to relinquish it.
You're
like,
right.
They'll find a way to make money.
Yeah, they'll probably have ventilators on the sidelines before they stop that season. So
right,
we'll see. I'm still nervous.
I wouldn't worry about the president. It sounds like he's doing all right, and he'll be happy and healthy. And I know he'll be there to open your ballot and count your vote. Himself, Dustin.
He's not getting my vote, so just putting that out there. And if you want to vote for him, that's your choice. It's all good.
That's political okay. We get.
Well, he's not getting mine.
Anyway, to be honest, none of this really matters. Who cares about the NFL or Trump or any of this stuff? Yeah. Because aliens are real. So who cares, right? It feels like 2020s. Everyone's like, well, might as well. What else could happen this year? I don't know. I know that aliens are real because you've heard of Bob Lazar, right, Dustin?
Of course I've heard of Bob Lazar. I know you've heard of Bob Lazar.
I've definitely heard of Bob Lazar, and I think a lot of our people have heard of Bob Lazar, but there's a ton of people who have not, and if they did, I think they'd be feeling the same way right now, where it's just like, all right, can the aliens just come out and play already? And the way we know about Bob Lazar is because he told us aliens are real. He told us about Area 51 like 30 years ago, 1989 at this point, and he's kind of like resurfaced in the last year or so, most famously recently on the Joe Rogan podcast, but he's kind of hitting the circuit a little bit here, and his story is kind of floating back to the top in terms of accuracy, and he's starting to kind of feel some validation. So what do you say we kind of dive into the story of good old Bob a little bit and kind of educate some people on that?
Yeah, let's do it, man. George Knapp broke the story in 1989. I think we should start right there.
A local scientist who says he worked at Groom Lake and saw the saucers joins us in tonight's interview. He has asked that his identity be shielded. Sir, how do we know you are who you say you are and that you actually have knowledge about what's going on at Groom Lake?
Well, I guess there's no way you could really know. There's really no way I can prove it without revealing my identity and getting myself into more trouble than I have already.
Exactly what's going on up there?
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin, and they're being test flown and basically just analyzed.
You say there's 9 saucers. How are those tests going?
As far as what?
As far as whether they're successful and that sort of thing.
Oh, well, some of them are 100% intact and operate perfectly. The other ones are being taken apart. I was involved mainly in propulsion and the power source.
Where did we get these saucers? How did they come into the hands of the government?
I haven't the slightest idea, and you have to understand the information is very compartmentalized, and I was only allowed information that pertained particularly to what I was involved in.
But I mean, couldn't our government have made them as opposed to getting them from some alien beings?
Totally impossible. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all. In fact, one of the reasons that I'm going forward with this information, it's not only a crime against the American people, it's a crime against the scientific community, which I've been part of for some time. We're actively trying to duplicate these systems, yet they are in existence now and basically in the hands of the government.
What would happen to you if the government learned that you were giving us this information?
Anything could happen. I don't know. I haven't the slightest idea.
Well, you said you referred to getting into trouble. Have you had some repercussions already?
Yeah, I've been threatened with being charged with espionage. I've had my life threatened by them, my wife's life threatened by them, and I mean, I don't know where else you can go from there.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us. Pretty interesting stuff you've got to say. Thank you.
So Bob Lazar in that clip, obviously if you check us out on YouTube, you'll see the full clip. But let me just describe it to you if you're just listening, is basically he's shadowed out. It's very like old school. It's 1989. I think it said May 12th exactly. He comes out with George Knapp, who's the local investigative journalist for local Las Vegas television. And George Knapp is your standard investigative reporter. Like he's doing pieces about like mob bosses and like, you know, political corruption. He's like that guy. All right. I don't know how many people actually still watch like the 5 or 6 o'clock news, but you got to realize like back in the day, that was the news, right? Like you had your local news at like 5 or 6, and then you'd have like your national primetime, like 60 Minutes, Ted Koppel, Tom Brokaw, Dan Rathers, those guys would come out like and do like the 7, 8 o'clock hour, like primetime stuff. After this interview gets played, where does it live other than just on local television, unless it gets picked up by the national news and spread out there? There is no YouTube. There is no Google. There's no like database where you and I could just go look it up. So that's like step one, is just realizing like what you're looking at and sort of setting the painting the picture of where he's at. Now, Dustin, why is he doing this anonymously at first? Because obviously now we know his name and we know his story and stuff, but tell us, why is he originally cloaked? Like, why is this cloak and dagger to begin with? What's he afraid of?
Well, he was scared at first, and so he did it anonymously. I think in that exact interview, he said his name was Dennis, but he came out shortly after that and revealed himself with a real interview, a sit-down interview, I believe, with George Knapp, and it's mostly for insurance. He was scared for his life, and he felt that like he said, it was a crime against the scientific community and a crime against humanity that this information should be out there. And in doing so, he felt that if he put himself out in the limelight, that he'd be a little bit more protected, because it's like, well, you can't just kill me if I'm on camera and people know about this story. So it was insurance originally for him. I think that was the majority of the reasoning behind him coming out and getting the story out there.
If you're anonymous, it's easier for you to disappear because nobody knows who to look for, right?
Exactly.
And the reason why he's scared is because essentially here's the quick version, which is Bob Lazar is a young man in his early 20s, 22, 23. He's gone to school at Caltech, MIT. He gets a job at Los Alamos, and there was another job, private industry that they're both like government defense contractors, I believe out of New Mexico. And Los Alamitos is famous for, that's where they were developing like nuclear weapons and stuff back in like the post World War II and stuff. That was all going on in New Mexico. Anyway, he gets an invite to come to these companies because he demonstrates that he's like this crazy propulsion genius. So he puts a rocket or something in the back of a Honda, just like a Honda Civic or something.
Yeah,
he puts like a jet engine.
Yeah, he built jet engines in his garage. He put them in the Honda, on a motorcycle. He built a particle accelerator in his bedroom just for fun.
Yeah,
because he's just kind of a weird dude, super nerd that just thinks outside the box. And what is it? This was 19. You said it was in the 1980s.
This is the 80s.
Yeah,
this is the mid to late 80s.
And if they've been housing this stuff and working on this stuff since the Roswell incident, then they've had these things for a while. They've been working on it for a while, so maybe they're kind of getting desperate and trying to get different minds on it.
Yeah, and that's what he's alluded to is why he thinks he's in there. But just try to get through the story here so people actually know where we're going, and so we can get more granular here. Which is, so he gets an invite out to Los Alamitos. That is a defense contractor. Ultimately, that's who puts him in touch with Nellis Air Force Base, which is more commonly known now as Area 51. But he's the one who turns us on to the idea of it's not just Area 51 you're interested in, but there's a separate location called S4. So he goes out, he works at S4. His claim is that while he worked at this location, he was brought on as a propulsion expert to work on alien craft, extraterrestrial craft. These are his exact words. He's not like beating around the bush in terms of where he thinks they came from. They're not made on Earth. No way, no how. He works on the propulsion, and I'm trying to do the quick version because there is no quick version. I mean, it's like a 3-hour interview he gives on the story. While he's working, he has in order to maintain your security clearances, they basically like tap his phones and stuff. Long story short, they find out like his wife is having an affair on him. So they start to kind of give him the cold shoulder. He freaks out. He starts bringing his buddies out like on a Wednesday to see them practicing and flying the craft. Like, I want to show my buddies this because in case I disappear, I want to make sure someone knows what I was working on. And while they're out there watching the craft, he gets busted and he gets arrested. And so there you go. That's as quickly as those are the broad strokes. He gets kicked out of the program, obviously, and then that's how he ends up shadowed in a truck, fearing for his life. Is that he just sort of spilled the beans on this like super secret underground program. So there you go. That's like the broad strokes, and so we'll walk through it a little bit more because there's a lot to unpack there. But I thought people should just kind of get like, well, why is this guy fearing for his life, real quick, right? So let's go back because you started to touch on the schooling thing. And this is where a lot of the skeptics will glob onto. There's some like discrepancy whether or not he went to the schools that he said he did. Did he ever work at Los Alamitos and stuff? So can you take us back to like that sort of point in time?
Well, that's what pisses me off about this whole story is that the people that are trying to debunk what he's saying, they're not focusing on what he's saying. They're trying to focus on his history and try to shame him because they say that he's a liar because he didn't go to school here. There's no records that you can go to school. Back then, it's so easy just to go grab a folder and burn a file.
Right.
They did that. Seemingly, someone did that to his college records and all of his work records at Los Alamos. I mean, Los Alamos even has, there's a public newspaper with a picture of him talking about a project that he works there and that he is an employee there. And
it's the rocket car. He's on like the front page local newspaper with his rocket Honda, and it says right there in the thing like Bob Lazar of local Los. I think he's like in front of, you know how like you pull in you pull in the driveway and they have like the corporate business office park there. Yeah, man.
But there's no record, so he's a liar.
Good stuff, Tomas. Yeah, Tomas is pulling up the newspaper right now. Yeah, so Bob says when he came out, so it's a standard 101 tactic. I mean, you see it in politics all the time. Is if you can't discredit the story because it's fucking true, then you try to discredit the man. And I've said this all the time, which is like let's talk about like if Albert Einstein, right, was to run for office, if he was to ever get into politics, but he cheats on his wife, you can't deny the guy's a genius, so you just discredit his character and you attack his character for him cheating on his wife. Now, while I don't condone cheating on your wife, my point being is that doesn't make his theory of relativity and like E equals MC squared or that any more true or relevant. Like that is like, he still did great work. You know what I mean? And so that's like 101 stuff is like you attack their character with whatever they've got going on to try to discredit him, because clearly Bob Lazar is a very well-educated man. Yeah. And so it makes no sense. Like, where would he get this education from? He says he went to IT or MIT and Caltech. It's like, well, I mean, he kind of, if it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck, you know, he looks and sounds like someone who went to those schools.
Yeah, well, there's evidence of people that went to school with him or dropped him off at the library, and they say, like, if he didn't go there, he definitely put on a good enough show that he did. But there is that public record, that public photo of him working at Los Alamos. So if he worked at Los Alamos, doesn't mean they didn't hire him off the street. He has a really good schooling and honors in that school to get a job there. So that is just bullshit. He didn't really help himself, though, with his credibility when he got in a little bit of trouble with the law. People kind of held on to that one too, and he got in trouble.
But that's what I'm talking about with the idea of like attacking your character. Like,
exactly.
Okay, let's not use the example of cheating on your wife. That's like, I was just thinking politics. You get a DUI, right? You get something like that, and it's like,
Bob got in trouble with some hookers. Let's just put that out there,
dude. But like, I'm gonna be honest, man. If I'm in my 20s, because this all happened. Like, people forget. Like, it's easy to look at the dude now. Yeah, and he's a middle-aged man, like in his, I don't know, he's probably like in his 50s. He must be, because so by the time this is going on, I think he's around 23 years old, 24 really years old. So he's making good money. He's driving fast, like fancy cars. He's a smart dude. He's on this like super secretive government program working on fucking UFOs and like alien spacecraft.
Living the dream.
I'm sorry, dude. But you're gonna have a little bit of cock in your walk as well. You know what I mean? And then when you find out that he found out that his wife was cheating on him. That's why the government kind of got weird on him, is because they were basically bugging his phones, and his wife was having an affair with like a flight instructor, I think it was, and so that compromises your security clearance because you can be manipulated with that information. And so anyway, the point I'm getting at is I'm just trying to be defensive of like a man in his early 20s with his world crumbling around him, right? I mean, I'm surprised that he held together as well as he did, to be honest. Like, absolutely. I think most guys crack under the pressure and we never hear from them again.
Yeah.
So,
and when he got in trouble with the law too, they were asking for his history, his background, where he went to school, where did you work? And he gave them the same information. I went to Caltech, I worked at Los Alamos, and they couldn't find any record as well. And that hurt his case, but he stuck to his story. Like, if he was lying, that was his time to come clean, tell the truth, because you're gonna be looking at some serious jail time if you don't.
Right.
And so the fact that he told, I feel he tells the truth.
Stuck to the story.
He stuck to the story. So,
and he's told the same story for 30 years, by the way. Like, every once in a while he pops up. I think you're the one that actually turned me on. So if you want to get like, I think there's two big things. If you want to do your own research on Bob Lazar, I would highly recommend watching the Jeremy Corbell documentary, which is called Bob Lazar and Flying Saucers.
Yeah, Area 51 Flying Saucers. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, so, and that was, you showed me that a couple years ago.
It's very compelling. It's a very compelling story.
Oh, dude, when I watched that movie, I immediately I think for the next 48 hours, I Googled everything there was to know about Bob Lazar and this entire story, because I was like, how have I never really heard this? Right. And so I would watch that, and then I would couple that with his interview on the Joe Rogan podcast. Cause like I said, that's like a 2.5, 3 hour session of just him spilling the beans, and Corbell is with him.
Yeah. The director of the film.
But the more you hear him tell this story, the more information you get out of it, the more fuller and clearer picture you'll get. Because I've listened to this story numerous times on multiple different outlets that he's done over the time, and I always get these new extra little details, like in the film, I don't remember him talking about his what would you call it, like his coworker Barry.
Barry?
But he talks about Barry a lot. This guy he worked with, his lab partner is what it would be called on the Joe Rogan podcast. So you get a whole different perspective. You're like, whoa, this is a whole new lens. And then he gives you all this extra background knowledge because Barry's been at Area 51 longer than Bob was. I think in totality, Bob was only there for something like 6 months before it all came crashing down. So it's a very small snapshot, but it's like, it's major, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the skeptics, they basically, the government burns him in terms of hiding his school records and hiding his records in terms of that he worked at Los Al. The thing is, I think there's clips somewhere out there where he goes with George Knapp and like a news television crew and walks into the damn building, and they just like wave him in because they've seen him so much. He doesn't have to even flash a pass or anything. And it's like the doorman's like getting the door for him. It's like, hey, Bob, how's it going? And it's like, hey, Jerome, nice to see you today. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, if this dude didn't work here, how the hell did the people in the building all know his name? Like, this goes back to like the moon landing, the same feeling I had of the moon landing, which is like, if this is a coerced or like fabricated story, the amount of time, effort, and commitment it would take, like this guy would make so much more money winning a fucking Oscar like Daniel Day-Lewis style than like not doing anything and telling this story just for us, the public, to digest, because he hasn't made a dime off this story that I know of, and he's just like, in his own words, it's like he would, if you knew what you knew today, would you do it all over again? And he's like, absolutely not. This ruined my life.
Yeah. I mean, he would still be there, potentially still be there at S4 working on this stuff if he didn't, fuck up. And I think he would rather stay in silence. If it were me, I wouldn't care if I didn't have to tell a soul for the rest of my life. I got to experience that. I mean, that's the science alone, the technology alone, having that at your disposal, having that knowledge. It's that's a gift. And it fucked up his life. I mean, he doesn't like talking about this stuff. That's what was really cool, that he was able to, or Jeremy Corbell was able to do this documentary on him, because he went into kind of hiding for the last 30 years because they smeared his name, and it really fucked him up. And so I think what helped Jeremy Corbell is that he's good friends with George Knapp, and George Knapp broke this story originally, and both those dudes put their entire careers on the line for this guy. They believe him. I believe him. I challenge every one of you to watch those documentaries and dig into this a little bit more, especially with what's going on nowadays with all this information coming out. How vindicated must he feel that everything over the last several years, there's just little more information coming out, that all these things he said that people try to debunk is absolutely true.
Right.
That's what makes the story so compelling and so powerful.
So, yeah, I mean, he describes, and I have a picture. Oh man, he draws out a picture in the film. He calls it the sport model, and he's mentioned this several times. So he gets a kick out of it. But he draws it, and it looks like a flying saucer. And the way he describes it working is much like what you're mentioning, Dustin, is the gimbal video that the Pentagon released. And it operates in the same fashion, right? And the gimbal video, that's like happened in 2015, and it was just released in 2017. So again, you're talking to a guy who was working on this stuff back in 1989, talking about how it instead of it being like a disc that moves like laterally, it's a disc that rotates so that it is vertical rather than on a horizontal plane. The disc, it goes up. And then what it does is it has like 3 directional gravity amplifiers that can focus the gravity waves and pull it through space, rather than traditional propulsion, which was obviously like suck air in the front, internal combustion, push it out the back. And that's what makes you go forward. In the film, I think he likens it to like if you put a bowling ball on like a soft mattress and you push down on one side of the mattress, the ball is going to roll to where you've pushed down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he describes it, is you're distorting gravity. So what it is it's like instead of propelling you forward, he's like you're falling forward.
You're like getting pulled forward.
Yeah, you're being pulled forward, but you're falling into gravity. Like it's shooting this gravity wave that is bending space-time, and you're falling into it. And it almost sounds like the warp drive from Star Trek, to be honest. Or like lights, like Star Wars talks about, like when the Millennium Falcon kicks it in and like all the lights go and like fly by, like time stands still for them. It sounds exactly like that, which is like bananas, right? Because
absolutely insane. I mean, that I can't even imagine the technology in that hangar. He said there was 9 crafts in there, and he only got to work on one of them. I think he said he saw one other one, but he only got to work on one of them, and he only got to work in one specific chamber of it, which was the propulsion systems, the anti-gravity propulsion systems, and got briefed on some things that surprised even him. And to have, I just can't even imagine what other cool stuff is in there.
So he was talking about how he was walking through the hangar and the bay doors were opened up, and he could see there were 9 spacecraft in there. Some 100% fully intact, some were beat up.
Yep.
He's even mentioned, this was like a little bombshell. Again, like I said, the more times you hear him tell this story, the more little nuggets get exposed. He mentioned that Barry, or someone had mentioned to him that one was found in like an archaeological dig. So they mentioned that like it was implied that one was like incredibly old, right? And that's just like a little like hold up. Like not only is there like 9 spacecraft, but like you're saying that like someone was out there digging for dinosaur bones, basically. And then could you imagine? And then all of a sudden, like ding ding, your little chisel starts banging on this like metallic like spacecraft, and you're like, what the hell is this thing? Oh man. And then my whole brain went to like, okay, so how the hell do they how do you find something like that and then excavate it, and all of which is like under the radar, right? That must be where like the Men in Black or some shit comes in, and like the government throws up the big blue tarps, because I don't know how you like excavate a spacecraft and like get it to Area 51 without anyone noticing, you know?
Yeah, that's impressive. I can't give you that answer unless they have some.
Well, that's why he was implying that everything, that some of them were super old, like even older than like Roswell and stuff. Because when you look back through time, I mean, there are UFO encounters or documentation like way back, right? Like you can get into like the religious texts and all that stuff, and whether that was implied or if it was metaphorical. But I'm talking about like at least like in the 1800s and stuff. There are like the local Gazette was writing about like a spacecraft crash, and there was like a little green man that that died, and so the locals felt bad for him, so they gave him like a traditional Christian burial.
Yeah, I know.
And it's like, you know what I mean? And it's recording this stuff. So
no,
like,
exactly. I know exactly the incident you're talking about. I wish I could. It's a big event in history. Like it was in the papers. It was a UFO crash. There was an actual, like you said, there was a grave with on his headstone. There was like a UFO, and they even went back later to try and dig him up, and they said it wasn't there. And then they moved the body. It's all documented.
This was in I want to say it was like Texas.
It's
or
like
something,
1891, something like that.
Yeah.
Like some farm in some field, but it made papers, and it wasn't a big deal. It was like, this crash happened, and there's a little body.
Well, because again, everything is relative in terms of controlling the flow of information, and like it's the same. We made the same point with Roswell, which is like, for 3 days. The headline, Air Force says flying saucer crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. That existed for 3 days before they retracted and came out with the cover-up. And that's what sent the whole thing in, because that actually got national play, right? Yeah. So the more this information, the more readily available this becomes. And again, Bob Lazar, I mean, he was like an overnight success. I've heard George Knapp talk about how the the news station after that interview was played was like inundated with like phone calls and inquiries like from around the world. People are like, who is this guy, right? And people need to know that a lot of what Lazar has said, like, for example, first of all, Area 51 exists. And then without Bob Lazar, we would have never heard of something called Area S4, which is where he says they actually keep the spacecraft. And that's right next to Groom Lake. And so if you're out there, like people are like trying to Google Earth this and shit, you can see, and he mentioned that they were like underground bases dug into the side of a mountain. And you can kind of see the vague, like the outline of a hangar door at the base of this mountain next to Groom Lake. And it makes sense. Like, I don't understand why people, it's almost like, I think it was Carl Sagan, unidentified, likes to push the quote where it's like extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. It's like everyone wants this like crazy smoking gun thing. Yeah. And here's fucking Bob Lazar, like the most smoking gun you can get. Yeah. And people are like, nah, I still don't know about this.
Yeah. Well, I think it validates him even more for him to even know that S4 was there. I mean, back then, nobody knew what S4 was. Everyone knew what Area 51 was because there was a sign, there was a fence. Area 51, this is a publicly known base. Now, S4 is publicly known to be there. Back then, it wasn't. So there's no way that dude knew that was there and then just decided to make up some bullshit about it, you know?
Right. And the other thing is, he's been validated in several different ways. So he talked about entering the base using a hand scanner that didn't just measure your like fingerprints. It was like a biometric like bone density scanner. And apparently the fingers in your bones are far less replicable than your fingerprints, or there's smaller
unique to everybody.
Margin for error. Yeah, it's like extremely unique to you.
Yeah.
And it's really like difficult to fake without, putting a fake hand up there or whatever. So anyway, he's talking about these hand scanner things. And then in the film, Jeremy Corbell, boom, throws down a picture and he's like, did you know that like 10 years ago, someone posted a picture online of one of these old scanners? And Lazar starts kind of geeking out over it because he's like, oh man, like, see, I told people this crazy stuff existed out there. And it's just like slowly but surely as time goes on in the internet, people dig and dig and dig. This stuff, starts to see the light of day and it just keeps vindicating him.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Same
thing with element 151. He claimed that there was this 115. There was an element called element 115 that he claimed was a stabilized element that they used as fuel for this reactor, and it didn't live on the periodical table. So he must be lying because that's not a real element.
Right.
2 years ago they came out and said this is a real element. It was the same thing.
It was like 2013, 2014. The Russians
still pretty recently.
They created element 115, and it was the funny thing was it was unstable. They only could create like two small particles of it. But speaking of skeptics and whether or not to believe them, I found this clip on YouTube. This guy was breaking down the body language, and I want to roll this clip because he's talking about he's cross-examining an interview from Bob back like in the early 90s and with the most recent, like I think it's the most recent one he's done. I don't think he's done one more recent than the Joe Rogan podcast. So he's breaking down those two, and he's talking about the body language and like what it would take to like physically manifest this, like replicate this lie over time. And then it's going to go into talk about element 115. So let's hold that thought on 115. Cool. We'll come back at the end of this clip and check it out.
Essentially like a cyclotron, which is a small particle accelerator.
Someone who's lying typically hates talking about the real deep details because they know those details can get them caught. Because to fabricate convincing details on the fly while also keeping the entire story in line with everything else they've said in the past is extraordinarily difficult. So a liar will usually divert or excuse themselves from talking about those nitty-gritty details. However, as you're noticing, Bob is openly giving very technical scientific detail that aligns with what he said earlier and what he said in prior interviews too.
So he's breaking it down, and he's basically saying what I've been saying, which is like, if you just the human nature of like what it would take to compound this lie over time would be exhausting, right? And for him to be as accurate 30 years later as he was 30 years ago. And some people try to get on the thing of like he transposes the timeline of things. It's like, dude, like my daughter was born 5 years ago, okay? And I can barely remember the order of things of her progression through life, right? If you ask me like, when did this thing happen? I'd be like, I don't know. Like I as other than like birthdays, it's really hard to remember like main events like that. And this guy gives us so much clear information. And basically that's what the guy was saying, which was like, the detail in which he dives into this, and it's like voluntarily, like no one's grilling him, asking him, and like calling him a liar to his face, and he's like trying to defend himself. He's offering these details up like freely, and it's like, I don't know.
Well, frankly, I don't think he cares if you believe him or not. He's just kind of giving his
that's
story.
what makes him more believable.
Exactly. He's just telling his story because he thinks it needs to be told. This shit really happened, and he care less if you believe him or not, but it's out there. And I mean, I fucking believe him. I've watched since, I started first watching on that documentary 2 years ago when I first told you about it, when I first hit Netflix. And that was the first time I heard of Bob Lazar. Right. I mean, I've been into this stuff for a while, but that was something I've never dug into it like we are now because of this podcast. And that story is really what really stuck with me. Is it's so compelling. Everything he says is just, he's believable, but it's not like he's trying to make you believe.
It's almost like, again, because I get real into the human nature of these things. And the only thing I can think of is like dating, okay? If you go out on a date and you're, as what the kids would call it, thirsty, right? You just really want to hook up. You're going to have zero shot of hooking up with that chick or guy or whoever's listening, whoever you're into.
Whoever floats your boat.
You're going to have zero luck hooking up with someone unless they're also like desperate as well. If you smell like desperate, if you work in sales, they call it sales breath. If you're desperate for a sale or you're desperate for a hookup, it's not going to happen. The key to all this is like indifference. Like if you don't care about the outcome, it makes you more desirable. And how I mean that, to put that in Bob's terms, is the fact that he doesn't care about what we think about his story because he's just there to tell the truth and let you decide one way or another, makes me believe him even more. And again, my favorite thing about this guy is he doesn't want a dime for this shit. He talks about how it ruined his life because not only the government was after him, but then fucking weirdos would like camp out on his front lawn and try to get him to like, contact ET for him and all. So like he had to move and shit because people were weird. Like this is a weird thing to come out and be the face of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's not getting like Nike shoe contracts and like, endorsements.
I think New Balance. I think if I was New Balance, I'd reach out to Bob.
Some like total dad, some Skechers shape ups.
Yeah.
I think that's
he did. He did several things. I mean, he took a polygraph test. He took several polygraph tests from some of the most like certified lie detector people ever to like run these things, and he passed every single one of them with flying colors. I mean, he either is telling the truth or he believes 100% that this happened. He also to get those details out because this is an event of his life that it's extraordinary. This is the biggest story in humanity, and so he went and got hypnosis done to bring out these little details that he forgot over time. And I think that's also what helped these stories nowadays and him help remember most of this stuff that he's delivering to us now.
Yeah. So he's constantly been on the defensive. He's never on the offensive. He's not out there writing books. So I said, like to Jeremy Corbell's credit, he had to like befriend him over a long period of time to gain his trust to ever do the film. And but make no mistake about it, the Bob Lazar story is a cornerstone of the disclosure movement.
100%.
Like he's the closest thing to the push for disclosure that we've had thus far. And if you already knew his story before, like the TTSA and the New York Times broke the stories about the Nimitz incident, the Tic Tac, the gimbal, and the Go Fast videos and all that stuff, and this whole like UAP task force, like Bob Lazar is sort of the cornerstone of all this, and you know, George Knapp, who brought all this stuff to light, has been, these guys are like the linchpins to this whole thing, right? Because once you get away from them, the further you get out from them in terms of like abduction stories, that's when it starts to become fringy. And that's where I think a lot of rational thinking people get off the bus, so to speak, right? And that's why I think Bob Lazar's story holds so much water, is because he's a very logical, commonsensical person, and like, he is not, he doesn't feel like he's taking us for a ride. No, I mean, I've seen a lot of charlatans out there, and I just don't get the vibe from this guy. You know what I mean?
He has absolutely no motivation to lie on this. Why would he would he lie? And it's he doesn't like the limelight. He's made that very clear. He doesn't like to be in front of the camera, and so there's just no reason for him to make up the story. And if he did, I think it would if he made up a story, I think it'd be more crazy than what it is. What he's given us makes more sense than anything in what I think.
Here's another thing I like about Bob. He reminds me of, I like to think that he kind of did what I would do if I was in his shoes. Okay. And what I mean by that is like, he thinks this shit is cool. Like he's like, it's the greatest travesty that ever happened, that he wanted to work on the technology. He doesn't even care about the alien aspect of it, because I have to feel like, to him, in terms of like the very rational scientific mind, statistically speaking, it's ridiculous to think that intelligent life doesn't exist. Okay. And we've heard many other people other than Bob Lazar weigh in on that. So he's got to be on that same wavelength. And so here he is, hands-on technology from this intelligent life, and he's got a chance to like really make some breakthroughs, and like this is the kind of stuff that these people that are like operate on a higher wavelength than you and I, this is the stuff these guys dream of, like being pushed to the edges and the boundaries of like what we know is natural law and like physics and stuff. But the thing where I check out, where I love that, because it's like what I would do is like, when he kind of gets caught, it's like, fuck it. Like he gets like an RV and some buddies, and they go out there and crush a bunch of beers and sit in the desert and watch the UFOs. Like I would come and get you. I'd be like, yo,
I would be
dude,
fucking pissed
you guys,
if you didn't.
We got to record. We're going to record a show from you got to come see this. Right. And then, so I want to go back to that clip, Tomas, if you still have it. If you continue right on where we left, the conversation is going to segue into, element 115. And the reason why 115 is such a big deal is not only is it supposedly the fuel source, and I want to kind of come back to like what it is. It's the fuel source that helps create the anti-gravity propulsion system that these things run on. But in terms of like what I would do if I got found out and I knew my time was coming up with this place, he pockets some of this shit apparently. So roll that clip and we'll come back. I just want to hear him talk about this stuff a little bit, and then we'll come back. All right.
Long tube essentially, and they accelerate particles with high voltage and, radio frequencies till they reach high speeds. But a cyclotron does that in a small circular area. And there's this very heavy element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts at the time.
115 is strictly an extraterrestrial material. It probably occurs naturally in some other places, maybe other star systems. Some people not familiar with science or chemistry say, well, that's ridiculous, all the elements occur on Earth. But that's not true. There are elements on the periodic chart that aren't found on Earth. 115 isn't that far away. And when they synthesize it, it's not like they're making a couple ounces of it. They're talking about 1 or 2 atoms of it. To make any usable quantity of a heavy element like that is virtually impossible.
But it is now.
It is now, yeah.
When did it become on the periodic table now?
I don't remember.
August 27th, 2013. Researchers confirmed the existence of a new element on the periodic table, created through nuclear fusion.
All right, so ridiculous, okay? And what he'll go on to say in that clip is that he was told that the government had about 500 pounds of that fuel. Okay. So in that clip, obviously, hopefully you'll realize that he just said that it's virtually impossible, or it is impossible to stockpile or create any sort of stable fuel source, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than 115 exists now in 2020, but it only exists in like a few atoms. So there's no way that we know. So well, the fuel source apparently came with the vehicles. So in the Joe Rogan interview, he talks about how they're able to they're able to turn these things on and off, right? They'll take them out. That's what he calls it, the sport model. And he's invited to come out and watch it sort of lift up off the ground and sort of float around the runway, and then it comes and it lays back down.
Yeah.
And then he's like, cool, right? And what they're just sort of like displaying is that they can turn it on and off, but his whole job that he was brought in was to like reverse engineer and replicate the damn thing. And that's what they haven't been able to do.
Supposedly.
And to Bob's
in 1989, they weren't able to, but by now.
Right. So what Bob says is they were basically, beholden to the science of their times. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I love that clip there because I hope you can tell maybe in the audio sources, but basically that clip from that YouTube show, it's like we'll post a clip. It's Gary Van Sheek, but he's clipping between interviews from like 1993 all the way up to 2019.
Yeah, it was last year. Yeah.
And so he not only is he telling the same story, but you're getting, and then you even get the little Ancient Aliens guy in there explaining the August 27th, 2013, right? So this shit exists now. So boom, another vindication, right? But he pockets this, okay? And this is a huge moment, right? Do you remember from the Jeremy Corbell documentary? Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember the scene where he takes them to the side and they're in the bushes? And he's like,
absolutely.
Hide your cell phones or whatever, right?
Yeah. That was the big suspenseful moment of the entire film. I encourage you guys to see it. It's an interesting watch as a documentary because of Jeremy's filmmaking style. So it opens up kind of teasing you about a FBI raid. And then they have this interview talking about 115. And rumor has it is that Bob left Los Alamos with this element and still has it. So that's a dangerous thing. And they want it. And they're keeping tabs on him, or at least letting them know that they're keeping tabs on him by these little raids every once in a while.
Right. So literally the next day, like as they start to talk about it, he's like, Jeremy pulls him aside. He's like, all right, so let me ask you. He's like, do you still have element 115? And like Bob's about to answer and he goes, hold on. He's like, throw your cell phones over here. And then the camera kind of cuts and you don't really get a conclusion. But the next day, the way the film edits, he's inundated by like 14 different agencies, saying that there was some form of terrorism that went through. So that's what they're looking for. But anyway, it was the reason why. Well, like, we know that he took the shit because in the Rogan podcast, again, in the film, it leaves it open like, did he or did he not?
He doesn't want.
They don't really touch. They didn't really touch Corbell. Didn't really touch on. He didn't hang on that too much because
he was trying.
There was supposed to be proof. There was video proof that they took the 115 out and they like ignited it somehow in like a gas chamber, like a protective barrier, and someone filmed it. And you could tell in the film that it was bending light, and apparently the only thing that bends light is gravity. So it's such a high potent energy source that it was creating its own gravity in this thing, and it was warping light. The problem is that video apparently was in the hands of like George Knapp or someone, and this is like again like 80s, 90s. It was like a VHS tape, and they fucking like recorded over it or something like that. He said something stupid happened.
Jeremy found it. That's what's really cool about this documentary. Jeremy uncovered a lot of cool things. He found that tape actually, but there was only about a minute on there, so there wasn't the whole process to give you enough evidence of this is exactly what it was. But he did find that tape.
So he pockets this 115, which the reason why I'm making such a big deal about the 115 is because that would be the smoking gun. Like when you hear him in that blacked out interview, that's the very first interview, and he says, "I don't have any evidence," right? Because they're like, "Well, how can we believe you?" He's like, "I don't know, I don't have any evidence." Well, he did have evidence. Element 115 would have been the fucking evidence, right? And Jeremy has said that he's seen it, and that Bob kept it in like a little hockey puck looking container that keeps it sort of like insulated or stabilized or something. And that this is how ridiculous Bob is. He was scared for his life. So there was a time where he had it set up in his house to where if he got raided or he felt threatened, he could click a button and it would basically blow up his house using the 115 and shit.
What?
And I was like,
I must have missed this. Was this in the documentary?
No,
What was this
dude.
in?
This is like the Rogan interview. And stuff,
that was a long interview. I guess so. It just didn't. Because I mean, I listened through it once, but it's like a 3-hour interview, and I must have missed it.
And you also got to watch Jeremy Corbell sits down with George Knapp.
That was a great one. Yeah, I listened to that one
and Rogan, and that's another 3-hour long interview. And they touch on Bob Lazar, and then you get George Knapp's 2 cents about everything. But they can go into such greater detail. I mean, because this is like you're unpacking this guy's whole life, and these two guys are basically scouring through his life with a fine-tooth comb because they're trying to discredit him. Not like in a negative sense, but like George Knapp is, like he said, he's like, I was not like he's been now typecast as like the UFO guy. Yeah. But he's like, I used to bring down mob bosses and do things about political corruption. I never cared about UFOs and stuff like this. But this is like huge. Like people are drawn to this stuff. And then the same thing with Corbell. Like they're out there in terms of like, look, if anybody doesn't want this, if anybody has more at stake with regards to whether Bob is lying or not, it's us, because our whole entire career trajectory has been shaped by this guy's story. And if he's full of shit, like we're gonna lose face too here. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what's been the whole big thing for me. And like, again, I don't know if he still has the 115. Obviously, he doesn't want to talk about it because it's probably still illegal to have that.
Totally.
And like I said, he's like Edward Snowden times 100. It's like you can't just go to like Julian Assange and throw 115 out there on WikiLeaks. It's like that's probably his like his retirement package or something. I think of like a television show. If anything should happen to me, release this to the masses or something. You know what I mean? He's got in a safety deposit box somewhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got a bunch of this kind of stuff that keeps going. And like I said, the story doesn't change over time, which is what I love. And then when this guy's talking about his body language and all this stuff, I mean, I love that because I'm just like, I mean, dude, it
validates it even more. Before the Bob story, even before I knew about the Bob story, I bought into the fact that we have reverse engineered alien technology. I always thought of Area 51 because that was the only real event that I knew of growing up. But I always believed that we reverse engineered alien technology just from my lifetime. I'm 36 years old now. And I remember our computers just huge, bulky. We had a little floppy disk. There was just text on the screen. And it changed so fast. So much technology changed. It's all in our pocket now. There's more power in our pocket, in our vehicles, and stealth technology. There's just so many things that have exploded since those moments that we know of, since the Area 51. And I truly believe that we reverse engineer the system, and so does the community. So does the UFO community. And for Bob to come out and say these things, it validates all those theories.
So there's supposedly two types of UFOs that people are witnessing, which is reproduced alien craft, right? Like you're saying that the government has somehow like figured out a way to like reproduce it to some capacity. I still don't think that they're into the warp speed. Like they can't replicate the 115. They can't replicate.
That's time travel, technically.
Right. Well, they can't replicate the material science. That's what everyone is saying. Is like, it's like the physics line up, like the theories line up, like the math lines up. Like human beings, we don't need UFOs to realize like that this stuff was possible theoretically, right? The problem is that what UFOs the problem that UFOs present to us is that they're made out of stuff that does not happen naturally occurring on planet Earth. So they are materials from another world or solar system, as they say, which obviously presents one issue. And how the hell would we ever replicate that if we don't have the elements here on Earth?
Yeah.
The other thing is they are intelligently designed and manufactured in a way that we cannot fathom. So when he talks about he was only allowed in the spaceship one time, he talks about the interior of the spacecraft was like a pewter gray, and there were no right angles, and he said there was no like mechanical lines or circuitry or anything. It was all smooth, almost like ceramic. I think he specifically said it looks like someone made the thing out of like modeled it out of clay and then put a wax interior and heated it up slightly so that it completely erased any sort of like tool marks or like straight lines or anything. And so it's like, holy shit. So it's this material that we can't replicate, and it's a manufacturing process that we cannot replicate. And this all lines up with things that I've heard from To the Stars Academy. I've heard Steve Justice and Dr. Hal Puthoff talk about the material aspect and like the manufacturing. You've heard it. Jeremy Corbell has mentioned it a bunch of times. And it's like, it makes sense, right? Because that's the hardest part to replicate about this whole thing is like, yeah, like we know that we could work it. And that's why I said they could turn it on and off and somehow they could get in there and steer it. But like they can't really replicate it. So anyway, there's supposed to be two types of spacecraft. The ones that we've sort of like manufactured in the vein of spacecraft, and then there's the traditional like extraterrestrial, the ones that are made by aliens.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you were alluding to. And who knows which ones people are seeing in the sky? We don't know. I mean,
I
it's a pretty well kept secret.
The majority of our sightings nowadays may be man-made. So if that's the case, then they have replicated that technology and they're using that technology. If everything that Bob said is true, they've been working on this stuff for years. I think they've managed to replicate it in some way, shape, or form. And if that's the case, they're using this technology, man. Like whether it's testing it against our own Navy and seeing if they can monitor us and engage with us, or going to the moon or to Mars. Like if we have this technology that works, like even if they still have, he said that there was crafts that were intact that were still test driving. Why wouldn't you go to Mars? Why wouldn't you go to the moon? Why wouldn't you travel around our galaxy if it was that easy? You had the technology at your disposal. I mean, to be a fly in the wall in that UFO with that pilot, I wonder who those pilots are. You know, like who's certified enough, who's to handle that shit.
You're talking about, yeah. I mean, so you're talking about if you were a human being, creating these and flying these things, taking them to the moon and Mars.
If they had 9 crafts and some of them still worked, they're putting them to the test. They've had this technology for the last 40 years. They're playing with that shit, dude.
Of course they are, and they don't know what they're playing with. I mean, Bob talks about how it was implied that the position that he was taking on, the reason why he was hired on was because his predecessor was killed in some sort of reactor accident.
Yeah.
So like the only reason he's there is because the guy before him died. So it's kind of like, hey, don't be careful what you touch in here, kind of a thing, And but no, I would definitely want to play with him. And I mean, I get it. Like I agree with you. I don't think if they've got this technology, and by they I mean like the United States military or
do you think
government
do you think that who has it? Do you think we have control of that, or do you think it's compartmentalized and it's beyond our government?
I think it's beyond the government. I think it's a public-private sort of like conglomerate. I think there's some sort of deep military apparatus that the kind of people that are not elected officials. They're not temporary employees. They're lifers. I think there's an intelligence or military aspect to it, and then I think that there's I think it's mostly under private. So that's how they sidestep a lot of the laws and transparency. So like you can't go. I know a lot of these UFO guys. The biggest way they break out the Nimitz incident and all this stuff is by filing the Freedom of Information Act, right? So after like post 9/11 and all that stuff, the government was trying to be more transparent. So you can go online and you can petition the government to release these files and stuff. This is something that you're not going to get in that. And that's because by being private, they're not held to the same standards, right? And they can hide a little bit better and stuff.
And protect that technology. I think that's
and you can totally protect that technology. The thing is, I don't think that they get, I think they might get flown around. I agree that maybe the Nimitz incident, something like that, I could totally see them like sort of getting more confident with them and piloting them to see like how much better is this than a, F-16 Raptor or whatever the fastest, aircraft is right now. And it's like, oh, we're totally kicking its ass. All right, awesome. Let's put it back in the garage. You don't lead with your like your right hook. You know what I mean? Like that's the deal breaker, game changer. If we were to ever go to war, you'd pull that thing out and like game over, we win. Yeah. Right? Because controlling gravity basically puts a force field around you. You can't be shot down. Yeah. You could just zip over, kill everyone, zip back.
It makes it so dangerous.
But I do think
that's what makes it a threat.
But I do think that bits and pieces of it have leaked out. Like I've heard stories that when you were talking about computers being shrunk down into basically cell phones, right, in our pocket, I think the whole idea of like the silicon chip,
transistors,
the microchip, and circuitry and stuff like that, that has been leaked. Alien technology, because you're right, we're post World War II, dude. Like
it exploded, man.
Whether you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever you think, it doesn't matter. This is the most technologically advanced leap that we know of in human civilization. I mean, you could be talking about like Atlantis and shit like that. Like, what were they doing? I don't know, but
might have been more far advanced than what we have now. Who knows?
We don't know, but you can't just sit around and like think about like what if. You got to deal with the here and now, and the here and now is like, dude, like this stuff is accelerating faster and faster and faster. So, I think that the whole reason that this stuff hasn't come out, to be honest, in my humble opinion, and Bob touches on it, and I've heard other people touch on it, is that this technology is so game changing that it would uproot. It's easy to like blame like the existential crisis, right? I think it's all money, dude. Like, if you want to know, like,
I think that's a big reason.
Not only money is the root of all evil, and if you ever want to like get to the heart of an issue, follow the money. Every like police officer, journalist, anybody would tell you, follow the money, and you're gonna find the lie. You're gonna figure it out. And for me, you're talking anti-gravity, dude. Like, there goes fossil fuels. There goes big oil. Right? There goes like the weapons, traditional weapons like guns, bombs. There goes all sorts of things, dude. Like, car manufacturers. Look how much people fought against like the electric car. That we've had that technology
for years.
We've had that shit for like 100 years. We knew how to make electric cars or hydro-powered cars. And the point is like this stuff is so game changing. We don't even know. It all comes down to money and how to monetize it, and how to sort of like drip feed it into the economy and so that businesses and infrastructure and stuff can like adapt and overcome. You know what I mean? I think we're heading that way.
I think money definitely has a big reason with that, or purpose with that, but I also think it's because it's fucking dangerous, dude. Like, if that technology is in the wrong hands, that could fuck shit up. It could destroy the world.
100%.
So I think that's the number one motivation for keeping it silent.
I mean, if you control gravity and space-time and all this stuff, like, and if you're like
power is like,
if you're an alien race and you're, of course, like I'm not talking about money in terms of like paper currency. I'm talking about
controlling an entire economy.
That's what I mean by like controlling the infrastructure of what we know is like not only America, but you're just talking about like first world nations, like stock markets and like the pillars of like democracy and capitalism. I'm getting, we're getting super big, but like this is game-changing technology.
Dude.
There's a ripple effect, right? It's like nuclear weapons, nuclear power. Like all that stuff. We don't need that stuff anymore. There's huge pros to it and there's huge cons, because you're absolutely right. It's like, if you control that energy and that you can harness that power, I mean,
You're Thanos.
I don't even know.
Snap your fingers. Snap your fingers.
Game over, bitch. But like, I'm thinking maybe that's why it's being spoon fed or drip fed. And the other thing is, people always wonder, well, if you believe in aliens and all this stuff, where are they? Why don't they just? It's like, if you were like going to a country, it's like the same reason as like, well, why aren't you buying a plane ticket to go over to Syria for your next vacation? Why don't you want to go to a vacation in Syria right now?
It's dangerous.
Because it's a hostile fucking country where people will shoot and kill each other.
I mean,
and you don't know. There's no fucking rules.
If we have 9 spacecrafts, I'm sure some of them, were dug up, but I'm sure we probably shot a couple of them down.
Fuck yeah, we did.
Like,
you don't fucking fly from the other side of the galaxy over to crash in fucking New Mexico because you don't know how to drive your fucking spacecraft all of a sudden. Like, of course we shot shit down. There's how many fighter pilot accounts of being scrambled from all over the world, not just America. Fuck, there's videos of like from space, from like the ISS and stuff, of like a little thing, floating across the screen. Here's Earth, and it's like floating across, and all of a sudden you see a flash, and then it's like the thing takes off, and you see a fucking like, you see something shoot right past to where it was, and you're like, gee, I wonder what that was. Someone shot a fucking rocket at that thing.
Well, they probably come over here and monitor us and see what's going on, and they see how we treat other animals, their own livestock, let alone how we treat each other, and they're just like, fuck that. Let's get out of here. What are they going to do to us?
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's got to be the barters. That's got to be like, hopeful, I would think, and again, normally I'm more skeptical. Again, I'm just going down there.
Well, you believe Bob Lazar. That's where it all comes from, man. Like,
I believe Bob.
Yeah.
Bob definitely was a game changer for me. I believe Bob more so than I like to get in on the ancient alien things. That's more of an entertainment.
Yeah.
That's also like a guilty pleasure.
But also that's the same thing with, similar to Bob's story with ancient aliens. Ancient aliens, like, there's a lot of theory, but they like to base a lot of stuff off evidence. They make theories off,
of course,
and that's what makes that compelling.
But with ancient aliens, they're drawing more conclusions. Like I said, they have more of they're more predisposed to what is called confirmation bias, which is they are going there with the preconceived notion. Right. So when you look at all the hieroglyphs, you're like, naturally, that's a fucking UFO.
Yeah.
You're like, maybe, maybe not, right? But with Bob, this is a first-hand account of a guy that never really wanted to be there in the first place.
I wouldn't say that.
And that's the point is. But no, he doesn't. What the point I mean is, he wasn't like, dude, to go work on the propulsion systems for fucking UFOs. Yeah. You can't exactly go like on Indeed right now and be like UFO mechanic, right? Salary $75,000 a year, full time with benefits, right?
Maybe
you
in our
fucking
lifetime,
Google search that shit.
Maybe in our lifetime we'll be able to get there. I wish that I had.
You need to lay off the Corona seltzers, bro. It's not happening anytime soon. But you're not going to be able to go. So
the Stars Academy is supposedly building one.
Yeah,
so
dude, that's going to be so long. Yeah,
you never know.
Okay, maybe.
I just want to like, I'll be like a stewardess on the UFO delivering hard seltzers to the
I like
to the
how
passengers.
You're turning into a stewardess right now. For some reason, I just pictured you like being accosted by like Leonardo DiCaprio or something, like
what?
Just like slapping your ass as you're walking down the aisle right now. Hey, doll, give me another highball. I went back to the Howard Hughes days.
I like it. I was thinking Wolf of Wall Street there. Yeah, I mean, Howard Hughes.
Took it there.
Howard Hughes never acted like that.
Dude, don't take it there. If you can't handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen.
No, I like it. Keep bringing it.
So the point I'm trying to make with Bob was that he was not actively looking to work on UFOs.
Yeah.
That was not a thing. He was a propulsion expert, okay? And that's why I believe his story, and I believe, I'll hear people be like, I believe that he believes himself, right? And I'm like, to me, that's a fucking cop-out, dude.
Yeah.
I'm 2 feet in or nothing. And for me on Bob Lazar, I'm 2 feet in.
Yeah.
All right?
100%.
And if you don't, and I don't blame people for being skeptical. Shit, dude, like I said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And it's like, but I don't know if we'll ever have that. Like, we're getting it now. Like, the fucking Pentagon said they're real, and they're being briefed on the recovery of off-world vehicles and materials. And so here we are 30 years later, and like, I don't know how it doesn't get more smoking gun. And I'm still baffled as to how people are still skeptical of this guy.
Well, don't forget, didn't the Pentagon recently say that they're going to give us more evidence within the next 180 days? Quarterly. So we might I'm thinking in our lifetime, we're going to see a fucking UFO, dude. Like, fucking.
I'm highly skeptical of the government, dude. The government is notoriously inept.
But
not only do they push disinformation, but they also can just push. They could so easily just be like, again, we solved Project Blue Book and all that stuff. Nothing to see here, right? Mm-hmm. They could totally just be a wet blanket on all of the fire and momentum created. I think it'll be difficult, but again, I'm way more skeptical.
I know you are.
I'll take everything they say with a grain of salt.
I know you are. Yeah, I know you are. And
I'll believe an alien before I'll believe a fucking politician.
And and I'm the opposite. And I truly believe with the how quickly this privatized space race is going. We're going to be multiplanetary species here within the next 5 to 10 years. And I truly believe, if what Bob is saying is true, and I believe that it's true, that they've been reverse engineering this stuff for a long time. I think we have bright enough minds on this earth that they have been able to replicate that. I think we already have bases on the moon. I think we already have a base on Mars. And I think it's a matter of time before these privatized companies find that out, and the government's going to have to spin one hell of a story. But I think we're going to get there.
I think that's a likely event. I
gotta get off. I'll take it.
But I don't mean likely. I was going to say where I get off your bus and like
no, I'll take it. We'll just move on to the next one.
No, bro. I don't know about us already having bases established and all that stuff, because that would just be so much heavy lifting and secret budgets and all this stuff.
But if you have this technology, you could bypass all that shit.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I just, I'm more of a steady as she goes. I'm going to listen to the science. And what the scientists are saying is that the farthest they've gone so far is, when everyone is like, we see these vehicles and we don't know whether they're Russian or they're Chinese. And then to hear people finally be like, look, it's not Russian or Chinese. Like, we spend $800 billion a year on defense contracting and the military apparatus. And it's like, if we can't create it, then probably nobody can. And so when they start to say, look, it's not us and it's not them, what's the natural conclusion? That it came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So could we have replicated some of this stuff to an extent? Yeah, maybe. I think, but I still agree that we are still years away from truly being able to harness it to where it's
how many years? Give me
more applicable.
What are you thinking?
I don't know, because I'm not a
100?
I don't think it would be that long, because I don't think we have that long
lifetime.
In terms of global warming and stuff. I think it'll be in our kids' or our grandkids' lifetime.
Okay.
I'm talking about I'm not talking about disclosure. I'm talking about
the
fully functioning. If these vehicles truly exist and they are made of like what they're saying they're made of and stuff.
Well, you believe Bob, so they do exist.
Right. Well, yeah, I do believe Bob. So I believe something's going on out there at Area 51 and S4, that his story has been corroborated by too many people, too many different times to not believe him at this point. Yeah. So I totally believe him. And so that means naturally you have to believe that there are 9 spacecraft and all this stuff. So I believe that. What I'm saying is, I wonder if those are the only 9. Do we have more at like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base? And then do other countries, like do Russians have some? Do Germans have some? Right? Because they've all had their own sort of Roswell incidents. But what I'm saying is, in terms of like human beings being able to fabricate, because again, dude, you're talking about material that they're saying is not born of this star system, not born from the Milky Way or whatever. So like, how do you replicate those materials? I don't know. But I think that it would be easy for them to replicate the aerodynamics or like certain components to create a variation of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you.
That was super long-winded, but I was trying to like figure out how to like clarify.
All right, I'll
where I draw the line.
Okay.
Because look, dude, if you have this technology, what I don't understand is like, just for the sake of keeping it cloak and dagger, I guess. But at some point, it's like, what that's so stupid is how much money is being poured into the traditional rocket system. Like, I just read an article like last week. It was about a former NASA astronaut. He was the first Hispanic NASA astronaut, and he just developed a plasma engine that can cut the travel time to Mars like down to like 2 months. Okay, which I think it was originally anticipated to be like 8 or 9. So he's reduced it to like roughly like a third. Okay, or less, and
That's not bad. Let's go.
that's amazing. But what I'm saying is, what a fucking waste of time and money working on that shit if you've got anti-gravity parked in the garage over here. You know what I mean?
Well, again, it's dangerous technology that they can't get out in the wrong hands. So it's you got to hold that close to the chest, man. There's no, people are still going to develop their technology and maybe eventually get there, but I couldn't imagine.
Dude, but you're talking about like, we developed the nuclear bomb, and like as soon as we like made it, like, yep, it works, we dropped it on someone's ass. You know what I mean? Like, we don't I get what you're saying, but it's like, also, how does it not appear somewhere? I guess
we haven't dropped it on anyone's ass since.
No,
because it's intriguing to me.
Of course,
I have my own theory on that. But.
Of course, but the point I'm trying to make is we don't tend to hold on to the technology and bogart. I get that, like World War II, we wanted a dramatic conclusion. Yeah. But my point being is, like, as soon as we developed that technology, we used it. We didn't sit on it for 75 years.
I think we're
still keep it. We could be. I mean, like I said, I don't know. The closest thing I can think of was the stealth technology on the helicopters that crashed during the Bin Laden raid. We would have never known about that unless it crashed. But that is something that's totally theoretically. I mean, that could be totally man-made. I mean, we made the stealth fighter, right? Like Lockheed Martin Skunk Works created that stuff. So there is a human element. We do have to give credit where credit's due in terms of like human being scientists are still pretty freaking smart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't just like jump in the pool of like, we're not worthy, we suck. We have this material, but we just can't figure it out. I think we have an idea what's going on. Like I said, because I believe Lazar Story, I just think it takes a while to like replicate it because it's like manufacturing wise and stuff. It's just farther beyond what we even can comprehend.
Well, I'm really excited to dig in. We're going to do this in a future episode, but dig into Werner von Braun's story and his deathbed confessions and the things that he accomplished in his lifetime. I don't want to touch that base there, but I was just thinking about him right now. With what you were bringing up, but we'll cover that in a future episode pretty soon. I'm really excited about that one.
Yeah, I mean that's just like traditional rocketry and stuff. But anyway, with Bob, I mean just to kind of get back to Bob and sort of wrap this up, whether it's the S4 Groom Lake, it's the locations, it's the technology, it's the fuel source, it's people doing lie detector tests, body language tests, right? It's
everything.
It's everything, and he just keeps standing the test of time. And the only thing the critics can think of is like, well, we can't find records of his school history and stuff. And I just think that people need to open their minds and start to trust in human beings a little bit more and not institutions. And what I mean by that is, like I said, follow the money, follow the stuff. It's like Bob Lazar has gained nothing and lost everything by coming forward. Meanwhile, the people that were potentially like, his employers have gained everything and lost nothing. Because what they used his story to discredit him and to spread more disinformation. And it just sort of stunted the whole idea of progress. The biggest thing that I took away, and I want to get your biggest takeaway, Dustin, here, but the biggest thing I'll take away from the Bob Lazar story, which makes the most sense to me, and this ties back to the fuel source, to the security and just sort of the game-changing technology and stuff, and it not being used willy-nilly in front of us, is he's talking about how he thinks that the security and the secrecy is actually working against them in terms of productivity, because he breaks down the scientific method is based off of communication and that you can't compartmentalize science. You have a propulsion expert over here, you have a material person over here, you have, aerodynamic engineering or whatever over here. And if they can't communicate and cross-pollinate and have a cup of coffee or eat bad Chinese food and sleep all day and all night in their offices until they come up with an answer, it's not going to happen, or at least it's going to happen extremely painfully slow, because when you have the scientists compartmentalized like that, that means they all have to flow the information into somewhere some guy has all the information, and he's most likely some sort of military or intelligence type person trying to connect the dots that these very highly high thinking brainiac people are putting together. And it just seems to drag the whole process down. And that's why I've heard that the secrecy is so huge, because they don't want the technology to get out. But also what they do is they pull, I've heard that they pull the thing out every 10 years. They try to work on it. And if they can't figure something out, they hide it again.
Yeah.
And they put it away and they don't work on it. So then the stories die down. And that's why we don't get this continual flow of information or any leaks. Yeah. Because it doesn't get worked on that much. So that was my biggest takeaway, was the scientific versus the security aspect. And that's what to me makes it so believable, because I'm like, wow, that explains not only his story and makes his story credible, but it makes the whole UFO phenomena make sense and be more credible.
Yeah.
So I'll pass it to you.
Well, I 100% agree with that. I think that's standard, though. I think that's standard procedure. I mean, Bob maybe didn't fuck up, and maybe it was just his contract's done, we're gonna move on, and he just kind of took that badly because he felt all this power, and that was his normal day to day, was to work with this technology, and then the next day he knows you're not working here anymore, and he's like, well, fuck. But I think it could potentially be just a standard procedure to move on from mine to mine to protect this stuff. I mean, he was only working on specifically propulsion systems. He didn't know how the navigational system works. He has his own theories and, talking to the other scientists during lunch and things like that. But I think it's part of either getting fresh minds in there or a combination of protecting the information. Who knows? It could go either way. It makes me think of this one story. A friend of mine who works at Lockheed and Martin. I won't say his name, but he told me this story one time that he was working on a project, and he only specifically worked on these those tiles for re-entering the atmosphere. That was his only job, was just manufacturing those tiles. And it was for a specific weapon. And they were told that it was just supposed to be a prototype. But in talking to other people in other departments, because all he knows is this tile, but around the water cooler talking about this with other guys, they were told it was a prototype. But in discussing these things, they come to a realization holy shit, sounds like an order of 20 of these motherfuckers. So to me, that sounds like it's just kind of standard procedure for one reason or another. My biggest takeaway from Bob is that this shit is fucking real, and people need to listen to his story, especially with what's leaking nowadays. Is it just vindicates him so much more. It's the biggest "I told you so" ever for Bob. Right. And I'm excited, man. I feel happy for him. Really, I mean, there's got to be this huge weight off his shoulders. The Pentagon come out and said that these things are finally real, as opposed to people shunning him his entire life. But
the biggest thing is, like we said earlier, he doesn't care whether you believe him or not.
Yeah.
He just keeps telling the same story. And the biggest thing you'll see, what will continue to be seen, is I wonder if his life will become easier, because he's sort of reached somewhat of a celebrity status with this stuff. Not like mainstream celebrities. He's not going to be in People magazine or hanging with the Kardashians anytime soon. But in the UFO community, he's definitely a white whale in terms of if we could get him on this show or something, that would be insane.
Yeah.
Highly unlikely, because I think he only hangs out with Jeremy Corbell. But you never know. Stranger things have happened, like being invited to go work on 9 spacecraft in the middle of the Nevada desert. So I want to know what other people think. I mean, this is where I open it up, because in my sphere with the information that I'm getting, most people believe. Now, I'm aware of the skeptics because, again, if you're on social media or YouTube, but to be honest, and if you're a skeptic and you're like a social media keyboard warrior and you're just being difficult and you're not really doing any sort of research, I don't care about your opinion in terms of, I don't lend a lot of like weight to it when all the guys that do believe him and have been backing up his story have like 30 years of evidence to support this stuff. But I would be interested to hear what people think about in terms of whether they've heard of Bob Lazar. I want to know, do we have some or do we have some rookies? Because if you've been into UFOs for a while, you're already going to know this story, right? And this is going to be like a refresher course for you. But I think that we were doing this story when you and I were talking. We wanted to reach out to people that would have never known about this or experienced this, because just because you and I are well versed in it doesn't mean everybody else is. But you have seen the power of. Again, we can't plug Jeremy Corbell's documentary enough. We both have witnessed the power of showing that documentary to people that are not believers. And I'm not going to say that you'll be a believer at the end of it, but you'll definitely, it'll raise people's eyebrows. And I've seen them go, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah. My favorite phrase in his documentary, and I think in most of his films, is weaponizing curiosity.
Yeah.
It's really
That's
cool.
definitely his catchphrase. And, just remain curious. I mean, that's my whole thing, is just ask questions. So I would love if people went and checked us out on Instagram, Facebook. Leave some stuff in the comments, man. Let us know what you think. YouTube, we do patrol the comment section, and we'll engage, because you don't have to take our word for it. I hope that people dig into this. There's so much information on him. Look up Element 115, right? And check out the Joe Rogan podcast, man. If you're listening to our podcast, I mean, obviously Joe Rogan is like the number one podcast in America. So everyone can find him, but definitely check out the Bob Lazar one, and then the one with George Knapp, because they'll touch on that as well.
And reach out if you have any stories of your own. We would love to hear them. If it's okay to talk about them in the air, if you want to come in the air, if they're compelling enough, we do want to hear your stories. We believe you.
There's got to be more Bob Lazars out there. Like I said, once one or two people start to come forward, there's always this sort of like avalanche or like waterfall effect where more people feel empowered. And if we can really remove the stigma around that stuff, we'll get more of these smoking gun type encounters, right? Whether it's I encountered something with my own eyes, or I can corroborate what someone like Bob Lazar is saying, right? We have to reach out and we have to find these people and let them know it's okay to talk about this stuff, and that like we believe you, right? Like we believe you, and like we want to see change. We want to see this stuff come out, not just because it's cool, but like the stuff they're talking about is like, it solves a lot of these problems we're having with like global warming and all that stuff. Like you asked me, when do I think that it would take 100 years for this stuff to come out? No, because scientists don't even know if civilization will be here in 100 years. That's how sad it's getting with the crazy weather.
Yeah, didn't they just release a clock? They built a clock in New York, downtown New York, and it's like counting down the days. If we don't make a change, like we're going to have some significant weather changes that are going to affect society. It's like something at like 7 years or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of information, and that's a whole nother thing. That's just like a scientific thing that we can get on it. I don't know why it's a hot button for some people, but it can be. But for me, that's just one conversation I don't shy away from, which is, again, it's just like, dude, like, open your fucking eyes, research something. Like, don't listen to what people are telling you. It's like, you've got the West Coast is on fire and the East Coast has been hammered by like 30 hurricanes this year. Like, shit is crazy. And my point being is we better do something. And if this technology has an answer, whether it's like an escape plan or if it's the answer to retooling or recalibrating, resetting Earth, like we better figure it out. We better figure it out soon. And it's a goddamn shame that this stuff is just sitting in a hangar somewhere in the middle of the desert, and that we're not getting like the smartest people that we can put on there. Like, let's get Neil deGrasse Tyson and Elon Musk on that shit. You know what I mean? Like, let's figure it out and use it for good. So anyway, let us know how you feel. check us out on the I Believe in Humans podcast.com. And again, like I mentioned earlier, check us out on Instagram in the Facebook. Dustin, where else can they find us?
YouTube, and please support us if you want to support us on our Patreon. You can also, if you want to buy a T-shirt, we have a lot of new merch. It's just buying one T-shirt really helps support us a lot and keeps this thing going.
Yeah.
There's some costs that go into this, and the more you guys support us, the more energy and effort we can put into these shows and make it better and better. So thank you all for the support. Thank you for listening, and we're gonna keep on bringing it.
Absolutely, man. So guys, like I said, let us know in the comments what you think. We will engage with you because we love it. And as always, guys, just remember, it's okay to believe.
You're not alone. See you next time.
Peace.
That's one small step for man.
Welcome to Earth.
Is that a rocket?
What's up, man?
Yeah.
It's Rick.
UFOs are real.
Wow, he's riding a go-kart with a propane tank strapped to the back of it.